We now move to Senator McDowell. The need for the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage to make a statement in the Government's planned reforms in response to the Supreme Court decision of the 31st of March 2023, which held that the Oireachtas must perform its constitutional obligation to expand the franchise for elections to the Seanad University panels. Senator.
Thank you, Laska Hirlik, and I want to welcome the Minister here. It's a long time since the people of Ireland voted on this issue. It's 1979. You know, it's near. It's in the dim and distant past. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's 5 weeks now since the Supreme Court handed down its judgment in the Henhan matter. It's also the case that the Supreme Court has said that it will extend the stay on its decision until the end of July, in order that the government can come in the meantime, to tell the Supreme Court how much longer they will need to deal with this problem. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have now a situation where, on my count, there are 5 universities and 5 technical universities. And I spoke recently to people involved in one of the universities, and they reckon there's between 1.2 and 1.8 million people entitled to vote as graduates of those universities. So that's the first thing we have to get on board. The second thing is that the Constitution requires that whatever solution is brought about, those 1.2 million or 1.2 million or close to 2 million people will be obliged to vote by postal ballot. And there are significant logistical issues there. The next thing is that the 1979 amendment created a series of choices for the Oireachtas. And the choices effectively are that the universities can be grouped together in smaller constituencies or can be all put together in one large constituency. And I just wonder, you know, how practical it would be for 1.2 million to 1.8 million people to vote on in one constituency. But the other point that has to be, we have to remember is, if you take the figure of 1.2 million or 1.8 million, it means that a minority of people in this country will have a vote in the composition, a small part of the composition of this House. But the great majority of people who don't have university qualifications will have no say. And the time has come to deliver on the commitment made by Enda Kenny via the Manning report to implement wider reform of the franchise for the Senate. The Manning report, as we know, was a compromise. It continued in part the role of local authority members in electing some members of this House, but proposed to give people who had a genuine interest, say, in agriculture or in industry and commerce or in culture and education, the right to become individual voters on panels, on voting panels for those seats. Now, the time has come for the government to indicate what it's going to do. And I just want to say a few things. This is a complex matter, I accept. But perhaps the Minister will tell this House, has her colleague, the Minister, Ms. O'Brien, brought a paper to government on this matter? Is the matter currently under consideration? Is there going to be consultation with the universities, with a broader society? Is there going to be consultation between the party leaders and the political parties and the independent members of these houses as to what steps the government does propose to take? Or are we going to be given a fait accompli that this is what the government has decided in secret at a cabinet meeting, and this is what they're going to tell the Supreme Court they're committed to? The opportunity is there for you now to inform the House. Thank you.
Senator Éireann.
Thank you, Senator. Obviously, I'm taking this on behalf of the Minister for Housing, and as the House will know, and as Senator has indicated to the Seanad, the Supreme Court delivered its judgment on the 31st of March in a case brought by Mr Thomas Éireann, a graduate at the University of Limerick, against the state, seeking an extension of voting rights at Seanad University panel's elections to graduates of third-level institutions other than those of Trinity College, Dublin and the National University of Ireland. And the applicant had claimed that by not extending voting rights to other third-level institutions, the state had neglected to take account of the outcome of the referendum held, as you say, Senator, in 1979. The Seanad Electoral Act 1937 sets out the current legislative provisions governing the election of university senators to Seanad Éireann. In the recent judgment, the Supreme Court determined that Sections 6 and 7 of that Act, which provide for the election of members of the Seanad by certain university graduates, are unconstitutional because they are not consistent with Article 18.42 of the Constitution. That article was inserted into the Constitution in 1979 following a referendum approving the amendment contained in the 7th Amendment of the Constitution, which was the election of members of Seanad Éireann by Institutions of Higher Education Act 1979. And the Supreme Court has suspended its declaration of invalidity, and therefore the practical effect of the judgment, as you said, Senator, it won't be until the 31st of July 2023 in the first instance. So my colleague, the Minister O'Brien, recognises the significance, I understand, of the Supreme Court ruling and the need for a comprehensive response to it. And he, together with Minister for State for Heritage and Electoral Reform, Minister Noonan, and their department, are currently considering the judgment, which was one of your questions, with the view to preparing options for consideration by the government. What they are, I don't know as yet, but they are under active consideration. And I do understand that that work is being progressed as a matter of priority in the department. And obviously I don't want to preempt any proposals of the ministers or indeed any government decision at this stage, but suffice to say that the judgment of the Supreme Court will be responded to in a comprehensive manner. And as the Senator would understand, this government's electoral reform priority to date has been the establishment of an electoral commission on Comisiún Taucoin, was established on a statutory footing on the 9th of February 2023. Independent of government, it reports directly to the Oireachtas and will be central to the administration, the development and the protection of our democratic processes and institutions. And I'd like to thank the Senator once again for raising this issue. I do appreciate the fact that it is a complex matter, that it is 1979, which, as you say, is a long time since it's been voted, and that it is 5 weeks since the judgment. And you also mentioned the fact that there's 5 universities and 5 technical universities that can't vote, which is, as you say, about 1.2 to 1.8 million people. And certainly your concerns around whether or not there be a postal ballot and all of that are things that will all be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator.
Well, I note the Minister's response, and I see that Minister Noonan and Minister O'Brien are working on proposals to bring to Cabinet. But the first thing is that those proposals should be the subject of major public consultation. They should be the subject of consultation with the relevant committees of the Oireachtas, with the relevant university institutions, with the Electoral Commission and with the wider public. And secondly, and I just want to emphasise this point, it's hugely important that we don't just simply concentrate on the university seats, which do need reform, and I've legislation before this House to implement a reform, but that we take one step further and say that those people in Ireland who do not have university degrees, people who are working in hospitals, building sites, farms, factories, those people are not second-class citizens. And if we give the vote to 1.8 million people who are university graduates to vote for 6 seats, we owe it to the remainder of the population to give them some say in the election of the remaining 43 seats as proposed in the Manning report. Thank you, Gerda.
Thank you very much indeed, Senator. Minister.
Thank you, Senator. As a graduate of Trinity College, I've always been able to vote and have had the privilege of being able to vote. But others are not so fortunate, and I do think some of the comments that you've made are not without merit in that regard. I note your comments around a public consultation as well in terms of any proposals that are being brought to government, and I'll certainly bring that back to the Minister for Housing. And I'm aware that this issue has been prominent since the defeat of the referendum proposal as well to abolish the Seanad in 2013. You did mention that about the Manning report, and there have been 2 major reports containing recommendations on reforming the election of members of the Seanad in recent times. Firstly, as you said, the report on the working group on Seanad reform under the chairmanship of Dr. Maurice Manning, and also the report on the Seanad reform implementation group, which was chaired by the Senator himself. And I am confident that the issue will now be addressed by government in light of the Supreme Court ruling. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. I'd now ask the acting leader if you could